This is a Dynamics 365 podcast focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host is Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. Over the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing seasoned professionals from various parts of the world, talking about what it takes to be successful in a Dynamics 365 practice. For more information on this interview, show notes, feedback, and resources mentioned, or to suggest a guest for future episodes, please go to nz365guy.com/podcast. Thanks to Maplytics for sponsoring the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast. iNorgic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV, delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions through unparalleled offerings of service and add-ons. Its flagship products, Maplytics, is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geoanalytical mapping app that empowers users with powerful map visualization and routing capabilities to drive better sales, improve business processes, and engage right customer at the right time. Hi everyone, I'm here with Jim Sheehan, and in this episode we're going to be focusing on the people in a Dynamics practice. Jim is a Senior Vice President at Power Objects, an HCL company, and has many years' experience working with Dynamics. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
So let's get underway. Can you tell us a bit about your Dynamics career so far? How did it begin and where has it taken you?
Sure, Mark, I'd be happy to run through that. That could take up our whole time, but I'll try to condense it and get it down to the meaningful highlights throughout the last decade. But really, Power Objects, and for those of you that had followed us, we sort of came into the Microsoft ecosystem in the sort of 2006 timeframe. The company was actually founded back in 93 by my business partner as a power builder consulting firm, and we did custom app dev for a number of mostly North America type companies and governmental agencies, and we're quite successful. But Sybase and that tool set sort of started falling out of favor, and I came on board in the organization to try to figure out what's next, where's Power Objects going to go. I was pretty firm in the thought that I wanted to partner with Microsoft. I had just been through an experience with Sybase where they did not really have a partner-first mentality. They weren't investing in the tool sets where we made our money. And I said, here's a publisher out there that has a strong balance sheet. They've got a bunch of interesting products, and we should be able to find a way to hitch our wagon to Microsoft in some way, shape, or form. So we looked at the whole, the stack and sort of said, what should Power Objects be here? And we were a custom app dev shop, so we could have just been .NET app dev, but that whole business model was changing. And if you think back into the early 2000s, you had vendor management systems coming into play, a lot more offshoring. It just was becoming a commoditized business, and there wasn't a lot of ways for us to add value there. So as we looked across the Microsoft product stack, there was this thing called CRM, and we had done a little bit of work in it, probably a couple $100,000 that year, just helping a few people implement it. But there were a lot of things that were unique about the product that we liked. We had the ability to run it in our data center and run it as in a hosted type model. We really looked at it as the next gen of UI for business applications. We saw it sort of as this XRM platform from day one. And we also, after sort of digging in with the engineering teams, it was Craig Unger back in the day, but it became pretty obvious that there was going to be some level of investment from Microsoft in this product for the foreseeable future. In 2007, we decided to quit selling anything else that we were doing. And we were doing web hosting. We owned an ISP, so we were doing dial-up and DSL and handheld development and websites and custom apps. I mean, we did everything. And we said, we're going to focus 100% of our effort on driving value with Dynamics CRM. We made that switch pretty much overnight and haven't looked back since. So that was sort of the beginning of the journey, and it's been an interesting path since then.
Fantastic. So you're focused purely on Dynamics CRM from that time forward?
We were. We had a couple projects that we ran out from. We were doing some big Power Builder migrations. That was sort of our runway. We said, these projects have this much longer to last. And you have to remember, back in the day, we were only 20, 25 people. So I wasn't managing multi-million dollar payrolls and things like that. So you could map it out pretty easily and sort of say, this is our runway. We have to go through and retool the whole organization to be developers on top of Dynamics. And we have to go out and start selling this work. We laid it out to the whole company. I still remember and I still have the PowerPoint that I used to sort of explain why we were going to do it, how we were going to do it, and basically saying, we're driving this bus and you're all sitting in the seats. I'm going to pull over to the side of the road. If anybody wants off, get off now. If you don't, this is where we're going. Come on along for the ride. And we only lost one person during that, and it was a salesperson that said no, they wanted to keep selling Sybase, so away they went.
Fantastic. So this year, I noticed that PowerObjects won the Microsoft Worldwide Partner of the Year for Dynamics 365 Consulting and System Integration. What effect does that have on your people, winning awards like that?
Well, it has a big impact. It's a validation from our only business partner that we're still adding value to them. All the Partner of the Year awards that we've won, and we've won many throughout the years, are a validation from Microsoft. These are highly sought after awards, and people are pretty excited when they get it. From a Dynamics standpoint, we've probably won as many Partner of the Year awards as anybody. And I would like to say the excitement is still as high as the very first time, but that I'd be lying. That first time in 2012 when we won the CRM Partner of the Year, it was like shell shock around the organization. I mean, we were just like, wow, we did it. So I have this concept that we run. One of the things that we do in the organization is we have a BHAG, and that's just an acronym for a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yep, fantastic.
And I like to say that it's the guiding light to drive the organization to, so everybody knows what we're trying to do. And it's the ultimate litmus test in business decisions. So if our BHAG at the time was to be named the number one Dynamics CRM partner in the world. So every decision we made at that time was to take us closer to that. And in technology, as you know, there's all sorts of things that come at you day in and day out around what you could do. And being an entrepreneur and a tech entrepreneur, I mean, everything's a shiny object, and I see profit potential almost in any enterprise we could enter. This was a way to really keep me focused and the organization focused on getting to that point. And we got there. And BHAGs are typically aspirational, and you work for decades to get to them. And in 6 years, we had hit our BHAG, and so the excitement was huge. We rented a big boat, flew everybody in from around the country, went out and had a big party, and really celebrated that success. Now we have not done that for every Partner of the Year, so I would it's they're not, but they're still critically important. It validates every single day what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah, brilliant. So how are your people involved in winning the awards? Like, I know, I've been in the same situation with these awards, and always encouraging my project teams to be, when they're working on a project, saying, is your project going to be the one that we submit? Or, and the idea of submitting more than once. So how do you motivate your team to go after, that BHAG and I really identify what you're going to submit as your solution to ultimately get you to that point?
Yeah. So PowerObjects has always run a pretty strong marketing team. I mean, for a practice our size, I think we've got over 20 people that just work in marketing. And
wow, fantastic.
marketing takes many aspects inside an organization if it's done properly. And I always say it should look external and it should look internal. So we've got some core people that are really the cheerleaders inside the organization around making sure that everybody knows all the great work that's happening. And if you check out our website and sort of look at some of the things we do, we have like this POTV where we do this internal video broadcast that we blog it and we push it out. But we have a line of people within the organization that sort of stand there and want to tell their pieces of the story because everyone's so excited about it. So we have a production studio in the office, and people will, the list of people that want to do things is longer than we have time to do. So it's really the marketing team that is in there making sure that we are successfully telling the stories of our customers and telling those back to Microsoft, telling them to the community. And it's sort of a cultural thing that we've built up that everyone's pretty excited about what we do. And we have a lot of other ways that we share our successes. If it's just in Yammer with jams, or if we're doing, lunch and learns, some of the challenges with that have been, as we've become a global organization, it's a lot different than having a couple hundred people in Minneapolis. All of a sudden, we've got 1,000 people across the globe, and I have to keep that level of sharing up there. So we're always looking at new innovative ways to leverage technology to make sure everybody knows what everybody's doing.
Yeah. So you say you've used Yammer. What else are you using? You're looking at Microsoft Teams, or what other tools to really get that messaging and keep that, everybody excited? What type of tooling are you using?
Well, yeah, you can imagine everything on the Microsoft stack. We're pretty deep in on the Skype and the Yammer and the Microsoft Teams. A lot happens with Inside Dynamics, as you can imagine. Our whole company runs on it. Yeah. But we've been testing out a lot of interesting video technologies from a broadcasting perspective, because there's something magical about actually getting people up in front live and talking. So right before this podcast recording that we're doing right now, I do something every Friday morning called Bagels and Bing. We call it Bagels and Bing because we bring in bagels, and it's Bing because that's where you go to get answers. And I sort of do a 30-minute company recap, highlights from all the departments, take Q&A, but we broadcast it live just because that's the way people want to interact on that and take questions. And it's fun. It's all part of the culture, and it's things that take work to make them happen, but it makes a difference.
Yeah. So you just said there it's fun, and I find it interesting. You've been named Top Workplace of the Year for the past 4 years. What ingredients do you combine to make your company that workplace of choice for staff? You obviously create a culture around it. Can you share a bit about what's involved there?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to... And this is something that's internally focused. And so it's weird to talk about on a podcast because I don't really put it in front of customers and I don't put it out there externally much. But we run our unit on a set of shared values or core values, which a lot of companies do, but they're typically put together as a marketing statement to say, look how great we are. What we've put together, our core values, are to sort of define who we are and the kind of people that will enjoy a career at Power Objects. So when I think about those, we leverage those to sort of bring the right people into the organization, and that's what ultimately drives having fun. One of our core values is love what you do, and loving what you do is if you get 1,000 people within a unit that are loving what they do. I mean, it's amazing what happens, and that becomes fun. You can look at people historically that have not loved what they're doing. I guarantee you, they're not having fun at work. But if I look at that core value and sort of see how that translates into what you asked, that's where it comes from, is by hiring people that love what they do.
Yeah. Brilliant. So in very successful teams, there's often this culture, if you like, there's often a culture within it that really leads to that success. Where have you seen that before, where, culture is really driving some of the outcomes that you're wanting to see?
Within our organization or broadly in other companies?
Whether you've learned them from others and then applied them internally, what have you seen that has worked effectively to create the culture that ultimately leads to your outward successes over time?
Yeah, so it's interesting being in IT consulting, because I've had the opportunity over the last couple of decades to really get involved with lots of companies, and that's one of the great things about consulting. Even though I'm not an implementer like a lot of the people that may listen to this, I do get a chance from an executive standpoint to go in and observe all sorts of different sizes of companies, and you've been consulting, so you know companies that you drop in, and you can just start to feel the culture and what the attitude is around whatever the given task is of that organization. Ours is to implement Dynamics 365 successfully, and it's different when you drop into nonprofits or governmental agencies or for-profits that are passionate about their products. I mean, there's things that it's hard to articulate on what makes it successful, but you know it when you see it. And as sort of the cultural guru with inside Power Objects, it's my job to sort of maintain that level of culture across the organization. And it's one of my top goals for this year and almost every year is, how do we continue to take that Power Objects culture and expand this as we become global? I've got teams in 5 different cities in India now. We're in the UK. I'm hiring people in Singapore. We're all across the US and Canada. So how do we take that magic that is that culture and do it? So if I roll it back and sort of say, well, let's keep it simple and sort of say, what were the criteria that made it successful when we were 50, 100, 200 people, and let's take that out. And it really starts back again with the core values and who we bring in and allow really to work within the Power Objects teams. And it's people that, think about adding value. They think about working in teams. They love what they do. They really live and breathe the technology. And we also look for people that sort of strive to take the high moral road, is what I would say. It's not always about maximum profitability. It's about doing good in the world and doing the right thing.
Fantastic.
So we continue to sort of hire around these core values, bring these people in, and then as leaders of the organization, it's my job. If we're successful in doing that, the only job I then have is to remove obstacles for people and get out of their way, because they will be more successful than I could ever be in trying to micromanage what they're doing, which no one likes to do.
True. So one of the situations I've come across a lot is you have staff working out, let's say, customer side. So they almost get fully embedded in that customer's business and may not come into the office much, and therefore, if you like, the culture is not rubbing off them to the same degree. How do you maintain that level of communication for your consultants that may be on a more long-term project? It's on the customer's site rather than back in your premises. How do you make sure that they're still very sticky to Power Objects and Power Objects culture?
Yeah, and it's one of the biggest challenges in consulting. And it's not just IT consulting, any consulting.
Exactly.
I call it sort of the rogue mindset. So you get so embedded within a customer's, you almost become part of that culture versus the culture that you're employed by. So I don't know the magic bullet answer to that. I can say the techniques that we use are really around the core value of that think team, and we try to leverage that. What I tell people is, make it through Minneapolis or make it through whatever your home office is as often as you can, and make sure that you find time to interact with those people.
Good.
But also remember that, you're the face for power. If you're the sole consultant, let's say out on some project, you're the face of Power Objects there. And what we've told that customer is that we're not putting, Beth or Joe out there. We're putting a Power Objects team member out there, and they have at their disposal, all the assets within inside Power Objects and everybody on that team, and they have ways to take. So we can make you that much better. So stay plugged into that team. So if you've ever, seen Yammer within an organization really used, that would be like our Yammer. I mean, people are posting questions constantly. It's like, I'm seeing this. Has anybody ever, experienced this? And it's like 20 answers come back. Oh yeah, do this or do this, or yeah, we've had that. Or so it's really about making sure that they still feel like they're part of the team, even if they're not sitting next to teammates day in and day out.
Yeah. Brilliant. So one of the things I've noticed over the last few years, Dynamics 365, is constantly changing. We've gone from a 3-year release cadence from Microsoft to now 2 major releases a year plus many smaller updates. How do you balance billable time with the need for staff to continue to develop their skills? So once again, if you go back to that example where the consultants are, on site maybe for 6 months or something, Stephen Covey always said, you got to sharpen the saw. So how do you make sure that your staff stay sharp on purpose, if you like, rather than just leave it up to the individuals, to monitor that, if you like?
Well, you probably won't like my answer, but I believe that it should be left up to the individuals. Yep. Now, it's my responsibility as the leader in the organization to make sure that the content and the resources are available for them to sharpen their skill set. But if I don't, it comes back to the core value of loving what you do and living the technology. If I don't bring people in that love this and really live and breathe this, I could spend all sorts of money sending them to all sorts of classes, and it's not going to make a hill of difference. But if I have those right people, and then I set up everything that they need to consume to be the best consultants in the world, they become the best consultants in the world. I don't have to have a carrot or a stick to make them do it. It just happens. Brilliant. So what I do is we have a whole internal education team that's in charge of doing everything that it would take to, manage, from the CRM to the ERP workloads in Dynamics 365. And as you know, I mean, you've been an MVP, so you've watched this product go from a Salesforce automation tool to, we now need to have Adobe experts to really handle the enterprise marketing, field service, the professional services. You think about what they've done with, CCA and USD and sort of where that's gone. I mean, we've got centers of excellence around all these specific skill sets, and then we just have to make sure that everybody knows the light's on, and then they just sort of get attracted to what they really want to become experts at.
Brilliant. So what I take it, you provide all the resources and saying, guys, it's here. Wherever you see your career going, you come and consume it and can you continue to develop your skills.
Yeah. And the whole organization tries to stand up and say, this is, because we're a utilization driven organization. I mean, we professional services, we turn time into money. And
my next question.
So I'm always trying to tell people, well, I'm trying to show people where I think the opportunity is going to lie. If we have a ton of field services opportunities in the pipe or call center opportunities in the pipe, we're sort of saying, this is what we see coming. So we're teaching this class internally, this one. If you have cycles, watch the recordings or get there live. Let's take advantage of this. And so far it's worked.
Yeah, brilliant. So that leads to the next question. Is this word utilization, which any consultancy, organization is driven around utilization of staff and billable time. So sometimes in a lot of the practice I've seen, it only becomes about utilization and nothing else. In other words, there's zero time for upskilling. It is 90 plus billable or utilization is what's required. So what's your opinion, and how do you find the balance between utilization and other competing priorities in developing your people?
Well, everyone's got sort of a utilization target, and that's what we need to run the organization based on the budgets that we sort of set out. Uh-huh. So people understand where those sit, and ours aren't in the 90s; they're in the 80s. Yeah. But it's I think it's realistic. Now we know just through experience that that's not going to come in a perfectly even flow. Absolutely. Never does. Yep. And it doesn't for individuals. So what we tell people is you've got this 2-month project that's going to consume 120% of your time. Uh-huh. Do you want to be booked on something right away, or you need a little downtime? How do you want to manage this? And they may say, I need to go brush up on this USD stuff. Don't schedule me on anything on this week, and let me do that during that time. Uh-huh. And we try to record everything we do from a training standpoint, so people can consume it when they need to consume it, because it doesn't always line up for when you need it. But it's the business we're in. We're in consulting, but again, it comes back to, I think, the love what you do and live the technology. Yeah. If and I typically will tell people, don't go into consulting if you're looking for a 35 to 40 hour
work week. Yeah.
Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job. It's just, that's not our life. I mean, we're at the whims of our customers, and we're at that. So people that really excel in this kind of business, spend more than 40 hours a week, working. But again, if you love it, and, the most exciting thing for you that day is to learn something new about this, it's people make it happen at all hours of the day. Yeah,
fantastic. So what strategies have you found to be effective in finding and attracting new talent into the Dynamics practice? The reason I ask this is that I've, in the markets I've operated in, I've seen talent move just from company to company. Sometimes there's not a lot of net new coming to, into the business. So how do you find them? How do you attract them?
Oh, this could be a whole 2-hour conversation.
Just give me the high level.
But I've got some strong feelings on this. Yeah. So one of the things that we've done that's sort of unique. So let me back up a little bit. Running the Dynamics practice and really growing it from the ground up has given me a lot of interesting views into this problem. I call it resource constraint. Yeah. And we've been in a resource constrained market ever since I've been in this business. Yep. If you think about where the product was at 3.0 to where we're at with Dynamics 365 today, we may not have eclipsed Salesforce yet, but we continue to gain market share. We continue to gain customers. We continue to be able to sell more work than we can deliver. Yep. So I've watched Microsoft wring their hands around this for years about channel capacity and sort of talk about, how are we going to get enough consultants? What can we do to make the partner? And I've always just said, you guys focus on the product, create the opportunity, and it's up to entrepreneurs to really look at that opportunity and figure out how to monetize that. So very early on, we made the decision that we don't work with recruiters. Yep. So one of the things I'm not a big fan of is shuffling resources around in the market, because I don't think it adds to the value of the channel and sort of what we're doing. So we have recruiting, or talent acquisition, we call it, but it's all pretty much done internally. And what I said is, let's look at what it takes to make the best Power Objects consultant that we can do. Brilliant. So it's about bringing the right people into the organization. So the first thing we're going to do is hire based on the core values. Brilliant. And then let's train them to be consultants. And I've added hundreds of people to the channel through what we call our CIT program, our consultants in training.
Brilliant.
So we bring people in, we hire them 12 to 20 at a time. They go through a 90-day course. And at the end of that, they come out and they typically will kick into the consulting teams. Some of them end up in sales, some of them end up in pre-sales, some of them end up in marketing. I mean, it's sort of fun. There's sort of a feeding frenzy at the end of every class as the leaders in the organization are like, I want that person. I want that person. But that's what we had to do to really become the largest dynamics practice in the U.S. Because there were not enough people to go out there and attract.
Totally agree.
When you start investing in people like that and building up the team and have a winning team time and time again, that starts to attract some of the other talent within the industry. So we do hire from other practices. I mean, it's happened. You don't get to our size and not have other people from other practices. But more often than not, it's at a point where they're looking to really move to a practice that's dedicated to the technology because they feel like their organization's moving away from the technology that they're passionate about. Exactly the kind of people I want, someone that's passionate about the technology. So we will attract those kind of people and we bring those in, and we will bring in lateral moves in more senior level roles in the organization. But that's sort of how we've dealt with this capacity challenge. And, I'm rolling it out in Singapore right now to really build it up because there's not enough people there. We're doing it across India right now and in all of our offices over there. And it's, people like to have some investment done in their career as well. And it's a great way to bring people in and sort of make them understand what the culture is about.
Brilliant. So those people that go into that program, are you typically seeing them come from other careers? Let's say maybe somebody traditionally an accountant or have some type of, business skills that then transfer onto the technology? Or are you taking grads fresh out of university that want a career consulting and then putting them through your 90-day program?
We've done both. And, probably the most rewarding is to take college grads and really launch them into careers where they can really, really have a meaningful career. But that's not always the best place to start for the organization. Some of the most successful ones, and they've been successful across the board, but where we've seen people with 1 to 2 years of a business app experience, maybe as an administrator or end user, but then taking those people and they're looking for a career. They found out they're passionate about the technology, just not sure where yet. And they think they would like to get a little broader than working for a single company. And, consulting's great if you want to see a lot of different problems and help a bunch of different people. So we have a interview process for this. So typically when we'll go to run one of these classes, we'll announce in a geo that we're going to do this, and we'll set up a beer and pizza hour or something in the evening, and we'll literally get 100 people to come to this, and they know what we're talking about, and we're typically talking about the career in consulting and how that sort of works inside Power Objects, and this is the program that we're hiring for, and we have way more people than we could actually ever hire, but we go through and really narrow in on the core values and make sure that we're getting the people that fit out of that group and bring them into the company. So we've just taken that and we've duplicated that across the world, and it's working for us.
Fantastic. I feel like I kind of know, based on what we've discussed so far, the answer to the next question I have, and it's around loyalty of staff and other practices trying to cannibalize your talent. How do you maintain or address the loyalty of staff? And, when, if you like, dare I say, vultures circling and trying to attract your talent away from you, what do you do?
all we can really do is stand there and lead by example and do the best job that we can to put fun, exciting work in front of people and create an atmosphere where they want to stay. As you can imagine, I mean, you were in New Zealand or Australia, but I'm guessing you still probably heard of Power Objects.
Oh, well, true.
So
I know a bunch of your MVPs as well, and see a lot of your videos, as you say, and your tweets, and Joe's CRM. So absolutely.
Yeah. So we don't fly under anybody's radar. So you have to imagine we're probably the biggest target in the world.
Yeah.
And as I've said, we're a resource constrained market. So, people sell something that they can't deliver. The first thing they do is say, who has Dynamics people? And then, the recruiters hit. So this has been, it bothered me. It bothered me more in the early days, especially if someone would leave. I really felt this sense of betrayal, but I realized after many of these people left and then came back, that sometimes people need to go out there and experience other practices and understand really what we have and the magic that is inside of Power Objects and why it is so special. And I've had a number, I can think of a dozen conversations where people have left to another practice and then have come back and they've sat down and sort of told me, the war stories and really thanked me for what the leadership team has put together here and how we run it and how we treat people and what we do. And that's probably the most rewarding piece around that. Yeah. But it still hurts when I have somebody leave. And sometimes it's even knowing that they're making moves for the wrong reasons that aren't, and I know, a lot of the practices and not everyone works as hard to retain people and keep a culture going as we have. So it's a double-edged sword. But one of the things we've done is, if you invest in your people and you keep fun, exciting work in front of people, most of them stay.
Yeah, totally true. Good. And I can tell you, just in talking to you, you absolutely got a fantastic culture. So how about one of the goals I always strive for is to create the concept of a master craftspeople, so people that they really saw this was a career. This wasn't a stepping stone to something else. This was about, are you going to be the very best in this chosen career? How do you motivate it? Do you sense that you choose good people to start with that are aligned with your organization, that you don't really have to motivate for it? What's your feeling around, kind of setting those goals high for your staff to give them somewhere to go and achieve and become the very best in the industry?
Yeah, and that's been an interesting shift as we've gotten larger, because I'm in favor of sort of flat type of organizations. I don't believe in a lot of middle management. I always believe it's just our job to remove obstacles, and you don't need a lot of management to remove obstacles. But as we've gotten bigger, you'll get senior level consultants and people that have really become those master craftsmen, and we have to give them career paths that really continue to feed their internal drive. And so one of the things that the delivery organization has really stratified, and we've started to build out these centers of excellence around specific skills. Maybe it's in the data skill sets or the field service skill sets or whatever it happens to be, and give those people an outlet to sort of feed that part of their spirit inside of those centers of excellence. And it's really helped people to continue to be excited about honing that skill and being good. The other thing we can do is, because Microsoft is the only product that we think about, and Dynamics specifically, making sure that those master craftsmen are really tied in tightly with the product teams and getting a chance to make a difference in the product, or at least talk to the people that are deciding the directions in their products. So that's always sort of fun to make those connections and keep those people excited around that.
Yeah, brilliant. That's fantastic. So my next question is around unconscious bias, and how do you proactively, being a senior leader in your organization, address the potential for unconscious bias to operate in the workplace?
Now, when you say unconscious bias, are you talking ethnic, gender, religious preference, that kind of bias?
Yeah, and where it's made, if you like, not deliberately, but just through, I suppose, inertia in a way. I'll give you an example. I was doing some research around this topic, and there was an example of a choir, and they decided they were wanting to get to like 50-50, not a choir, sorry, an orchestra, 50-50 balance between male and female in the orchestra. And so they decided to blind test whenever they, had a recital for a new role. And the balance still stayed skewed towards the males, and then they went through a process of, with the blind test, they thought that would sort it out, and they found that by having everybody take their shoes off when they walked onto the stage, it ended up becoming 50-50. In other words, the sound of shoes was the unconscious bias. It was the lean to assess or make that trigger in the brain that this was either male or female, and was actually affecting the decisions being made. Once they did that, it went to pretty much a 50-50 split between male and female in that situation. So when I say unconscious bias, it's not the active bias. It's more the ones that are tells within in an organization that probably a bit harder to address, but need to be.
Yeah, interesting example. So as I think about that whole problem in the modern workplace, and sort of as leaders, what we can do to sort of impact that, I'm not sure that I can effectively impact unconscious bias, because it's one of those, it's an undercurrent problem that's not there. But what I can do is make sure that I build an organization that will not be biased on the surface. How can you do that? You can pick people of different gender persuasions and leadership roles, or ethnic backgrounds, or religious backgrounds. You can make sure that you have a melting pot of people sort of creating the decisions within the organization. Now, if I built an organization that was just all white Christian males, then I would have this unconscious white Christian male sort of unbiased, problem within the organization. So and the other thing I can do as a leader is, when I see bias on the surface, I can take my values and my principles and sort of call that out and shine light on the bias. And I do that, whether HR always wants me to do that or not. But I don't have a lot of tolerance for it. But I'll have a blind spot on my unconscious bias. So I have to make sure that I'm not the only one in the organization making decisions. So we've got a very diverse population within our company. We try to keep it open and honest, and the only thing that I'm trying to hire around is our core values. None of those core values should be blind to gender, religion, sex, you name it. None of those play into that. It's about thinking team and loving what you do, and that's not an inherent trait in any type of person. That's just, some people are made that way and some aren't. And if you come through our organization, it's pretty interesting to see the diversity and how that's translated when you start hiring based on principles versus types of people or whatever. I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah. So where do you find most of the creative thinking coming from across your teams? And do you do anything to proactively encourage whether, so that the business, if you like, just doesn't get into an inertia of the status quo? How do you challenge and create an environment of creating thinking, and where do you feel it comes from within the organization?
Well, it comes from the POTV broadcasts are a great example. If you look at that, or if you go back through and look at, and people love to get those, that's coming from everywhere within the organization. And those are all, it's not people that I've gone out and said, you have to go do this because it's part of your job. These are people that are begging to go share this knowledge or to do this or talk about a subject that they're passionate about and get in front of the film crew and sort of do it up. I was just on that page the other day looking at all the dozens of videos that they've done around that. And it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. What I'll do, actually post the session in the show notes. I'll make sure I put a link to that page so folks that are listening can take a look at it. Tell me about what advice would you give to somebody considering a career in Dynamics? So, they've had a bit of experience. Their company might have implemented Dynamics. They're wanting to perhaps consider becoming a consultant and actually developing a fully fledged career with Dynamics. What would your advice to them be?
The first thing I would tell people is, if you've had exposure to Dynamics, what makes you think that you want a career just around this product? Does it get you out of bed every morning thinking about how to solve problems for an organization with this software? If it does, you're probably on the right track, because you've got to find something that you love to do, because if you don't, everything's just a job and just work, and life's too short to be out there doing something that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning. So don't go. You can make a bunch of money being a consultant, and our people do very well, but money isn't the reason to get into anything. You have to be passionate about it. So ask yourself, what was it that really flipped your trigger when you were working with Dynamics in your company? Do you want to be out in front of a bunch of other companies, helping them solve those kind of problems? And then we can get farther into consulting and some of the challenges that you have there. But it starts with a passion around the technology. And if they can really get excited about the technology and get the right team behind them, they can go out and have a successful career consulting.
Fantastic. All right. Well, to wrap up, I just got a couple of quick fire questions for you. First of all, what book do you recommend most to people working in Dynamics, and why?
My favorite business book is one called Traction, and it's more and people that want a career within Power Objects. I always recommend that they sort of read Traction, because it really gets into the operating system on how we think about running a business and why we do a lot of the things we do. It's a short read. It's really fun. But as sort of
do you know the author?
Gino Wickman.
Brilliant. Yeah. What's your favorite app and why? Well, what one do you use the most?
If we're talking about apps inside of Dynamics, it's one that we wrote called Power Survey Plus. Reason they originally built it for me because I wanted a way to survey customers and measure customer sat and get that data back into Dynamics. But I've watched sort of the iterations and where that's gone. And it's so powerful to be able to query segments within Dynamics and bring that data back and then act upon that data. That it's one I find myself using all the time.
Fantastic. Do you have any daily rituals that kind of set you on the right path for a successful day?
Are you asking me
how things you try to do frequently each week?
How OCD I am, Mark? Ask my team. I'm very OCD. I'm sort of these. Sort of my ritual is early to bed, early to rise, work out and get to the office. So I've got to spend an hour in the gym every morning doing something to sort of clear my head. And I like to start that at about 5 a.m., get to the office and get going.
Fantastic. If you could redo anything in your Dynamics career, what would it be?
Ooh, if I could redo anything in my Dynamics career, what would it be? Started our educational pillar. So we sort of look at the business through 4 pillars: service, support, education, and add-ons. Education was the last pillar that really built out in a way where around the training and what goes into educational components in a Dynamics implementation. I wish I would have started that a couple years earlier, because we could have driven a lot more value for our customers. And if I could roll back time, I would have done that.
Wow. Who do you recommend as a guest for the podcast in the future that we could invite on?
It'd be great if you could get Satya. I always get chills whenever I hear Satya speak.
Yeah, he's incredible, right? I don't fancy my chances there. I shook his hand last year, and I think that's the closest I'm getting to him.
Yeah, his schedule is pretty packed. I think it would be beneficial to get some of the new leaders from the product team to talk about sort of what's happening in the future with Dynamics. So, and those people are shuffling.
Do they know?
Yeah, those people are shuffling around so much, but
there is massive change going on at the moment.
Yeah. And if it's on the partnering side, getting someone like a Ron Huddleston to come in and talk about the one commercial partner and sort of where they're taking that in the ecosystem from a practice runner standpoint would be interesting.
Yeah, very good. Jim, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Before we go, if people want to follow you, or where are you online? Where can they find you?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the best place to follow me, but I stay pretty close behind the @JoeCRM, and that's our public figure for the voice of Power Objects out there in the world. So Twitter @JoeCRM, it's a great place to find us, or me.
This has been the Dynamics 365 podcast, focusing on the ingredients of a successful Dynamics 365 practice. Your host was Business Solution MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as NZ365 Guy. For more information on this interview, show notes, feedback, and resources mentioned, or if you know someone who would be a great guest for future episodes, please go to nz365guy.com/podcast. Thanks to Maplytics for sponsoring the Dynamics 365 Practice Podcast.